we're going to be taking the course GST201. It's Nigerian People and Culture. This course is all about Nigerian people, different tribes, their history, how they came into how they came into being, and before the pre-colonial era and after the pre and the post-pre-colonial era. All this we'll be talking about. So with this being said, let's hop straight into it. Okay. So we have in our previous class, we've treated some tribes like the Yorubas and the Oyo Empire. We've spoken about tribes like that, and today's tutorial we are going to be starting from the Benin. Okay, GST 10201. It's basically a course for people in management science. I think it's a management science students, 200 level, first semester. Now let's talk about the Benin. Okay, just a moment. The Benin. Right. Just a moment. Just trying to sort out my mature equity. Okay. So I believe we are good to go. Now, the Benin is said to be the first place to be visited by the Europeans. Right? The first place to be visited by the Europeans in 1472 AD. Okay. Benin is said to be the first place visited by the Europeans as early as first visit by the Europeans in what? 1472 AD. Okay, the first place to be visited by the Europeans in 72 AD is said to be Benin. All right, now let's proceed. Now, and the Europeans that visited here first was the Portuguese. Okay, Portuguese. The first Europeans that visited was the Portuguese. All right. Now let's proceed. Now, the Portuguese were said to be the first Europeans to have visited African continent. The first Europeans to have visited happens to be the Portuguese, and their place of visit was Benin. Okay, in 1472 AD, that is Anno Domini. All right, now let's proceed. Now we have that is that. Okay, just a moment. I just wanted to quickly put some things in place, and we are good to go. Awesome. Now, and this visit was during the reign of who? Iware. During the reign of during the reign of Ewuare. Ewuare. All right. So it was during the reign of Ewuare. Now we have that as that. Let's proceed. During the reign of Ewuare. Okay. Now, just a moment. My material here is really giving some. It's not just stable, so I need to ensure everything is proper so we can move at the pace required. Now, during the reign of Ewuare, we said already in 1472, and also the second visit by the European, which is the Portuguese. And the first was, now this first one, this 1472 was Rue de Sequeira that visited. First visit by the Europeans. Now this person happens to be Sequeira. Sequeira is the name. The first visit was by Sequeira, and that was in 1472. And the second visit was in 1484. By who? Alfonso. All right. Okay, it's Alfonso. Okay, there's an N. Alfonso de Aveiro. That is the second visit by the Portuguese to Benin. So the first was in 1472 and the other one is in 1484. All right. So we have that as that. Now, first in the west coast of Africa, to exchange ambassadors with major European and the Portuguese. Now, we are talking about various tribes and their formation and how they come into play. Now, we're going to be looking at some versions about how the name came into existence. Now, the very first version we're going to be looking at, all these ones are just facts. Some persons believe that the British or the colonial masters were the first to have come to Africa. No, these were the first people to have come to Africa, to step on the soil of Africa, whereas the Portuguese, not the British or the France or German were the Portuguese. Now, let's look at the different version of that explains the origin of Benin. Now, let's first look at the Egbariba version. Egba Revba version. Now, this version here says the Benin people emigrated from Egypt and in their course of the journey to southward settled at Ile-Ife. So they took their bearing from Egypt, and settled at Ile-Ife. Egypt was southward. They took their bearing from Egypt towards southward, then settled at Ile-Ife, according to the Egbarevbas version. Now, also, we also have the Igbaface version. Now, Igbaface version says Benin is the youngest child of Osanobua. Now, let's look at the Igbaface version. Igbaface version. Now, it says Benin itself, the name Benin, is someone's name. And that person happens to be the youngest child of who is referred to as Osanobua, meaning the high god. Okay, youngest child of Osanobua, which is if I'm not mistaken, the high god. So he said Benin happens to be the youngest child of Benin equals youngest child of Osanobua, the high god, and he and his brother, who included the king of Ife, were sent to live in the world. They were sent on a mission to go into the world by the high god, and the youngest, on the advice of a bird, chose a snail shell. Okay, when they arrived, and they were picking one or two things, and the youngest, on the advice of a bird, took the snail shell, and before you know it, he took some sand, he took some shell, he did some things, and he found that the world was covered with water. So following instructions from the bird, the youngest child turned the snail shell, and whereupon sand poured out of it and covered the large part of the water to form land. So basically, the Igbares version talks about Benin being the youngest son, and his brother Ife, the king of Ile-Ife. They were sent on a mission to come to earth and dominate it. And just arriving, they discovered that the earth was filled up with water. And on their arrival, there was a bird that advised Benin to pick up a snail shell and turn it upside down, and from there, sand came out of it, and the sand made land, formed land on the big water, and from there henceforth was land, and that was how Benin came into light. That is the Igbaface version. Bird advice, snail shell, sand equals land on water, and that is the conclusion of it, the Igbares version. Now we have the Ogisors. Now we have the Ogisor version. Now this period of pre-colonial Benin history is known as the Ogisor era, where the pre-colonial Benin history started from. That is the Ogisor era. Now this Ogisor means what? Kings of the sky. Ogisor. Kings of the sky. Alright, Ogisor, kings of the sky. Now the first Ogisor was known as Igbodo. Igbodo, the first Ogisor. Igbodo. Igbodo happens to be the very first Ogisor. Now let's proceed. Ere then succeed Ogisor. After the reigns of kings of the sky succeeded, the era was Ere, and thereafter Orire succeeded Ere. Alright, now the last Ogisor was called Owodo. Right, Now, history tells that Owodo was the one that clashed with nobles and eventually became a victim of intrigues of his wife. Now, Benin society was classified into. Now, all this we are just saying is the someone's version is the version of the Ogiso. All this is Ogisho version. Talks about the kings of the sky. Talks about Ogisho, managing the city, or Ogisho in the era or in the reign of Benin. And we have Owodo, we have Iri, we have Igbodo, just in this version. And in this version is where we have the last Ogiso was Owodo, and in the history of Benin, according to this version, it said Owodo happens to clash with nobles. He clashed with nobles and eventually became a victim of intrigues of his wife. So that is that about that. Now, basically, Benin City was classified into two distinct classes, which is the nobility, which is the Adesotu, and the commoner. Okay. Benin society is classified into two. We have the commoner, we have the nobility and the commoner. One, nobility, and two, commoner. Now the nobility stands for Adesotu. Adesotu. Alright, and we have commoner stands for Igiotu. Alright, Igiotu. Commoner stands for Igiotu. So we have that as that for the Benin, the origin and the different versions and analysis to the origin of the Benin. Now let's move straight to the Igbo. Now, the Igbo is best known for their segmentary or acephalous way of life. Igbos is best known for their segmentary or acephalous, divided in bits. Segmented or acephalous. So I'm just going to erase this very quickly. All right, now Igbo. All right, now best known for their segmented, all right, or segmentary. Let me use segmentary. Segmentary. Or what? Acephalous. Let me write this C way. Segmentary or acephalous way of life. Excuse me. Segmentary or acephalous way of life. So we have this as this. Just a moment. So they are known for their segmentary or acephalous way of life, meaning that not centralized. They are not centralized. They don't run a centralized system. Their system is divided in bits. That is what it means by segmentary and acephalous way of life. Now, the Igbos are grouped into 5 subcultures. All right. So we have 5 subcultures. Okay. 5 subcultures. They are grouped into 5 subcultures. And we have the Igbos of the southeast Nigeria. I think I should switch my marker. Let me use another shade of marker. So we have the first one. We have the Igbos of southeastern Nigeria. Southeastern Nigeria. All right. We also have the northeastern Nigeria. We have the west Igbo and we have the north. Okay, the west Igbos and the north. Okay. Now we have also, before here, we have the southeastern, we have the northeastern, and we also have eastern, just the eastern Igbos. Eastern Igbos and the eastern. So they are subdivided into 5 cultures. Okay, so we have that as that. Now let's proceed. Let's talk about the different versions of the interpretation of how they came into existence. Just like we did for the one of Benin, also we are going to look at some different version of that of Igbo. Now let's look at the very first version we are looking at is the Israeli version. The Israeli version. Now this version is one of the most popular version of the migration story of the origin of the Igbos. You know, it's one of the most popular version of their migration story. Now it says that the origin of the Igbo people is one that points to Israel. Just like the name says, Israel version says that they are migrants from Israel. Migrants from Israel. Alright, that's according to the Israeli version. We have the Benin version of the origin of Igbos. Now the Onisha and the Igbo on the other hand, on the other side of the river Niger, is the Delta Igbo claimed Benin origin. Now it says here that the Onitsha and the Igbo on the other side of the river Niger, the Delta Igbo claims the Benin origin. And we have the Inri version. Now according to the Inri version says Professor M.O., that is Professor M.O. on Wadwogu in 2000. Now he referred the Inri version as the only authentic version, according to who? Professor M.A. According to Prof. M.A. on Onwe Jiogu, that's ONWUEJEOGWU. That's Professor Onwe Ejiogu. It says the Inri version is the only authentic version. Now, and this version says the Eri descended from the sky and sailed down the river Anambra. Now, he arrived at Aguleri. Now he arrived at Aguleri. He met some orthodox group of people who had no living memory of their own and settled with them. Now, as their population increased, some groups migrated to other parts of Igbo land to establish their own settlements. Now, the keyword here is that Eri, said Eri, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing it well, Eri descended from the sky, and what he sailed down the river of Anambra. Now that's the river Anambra. Okay, river Anambra. So as he sailed from the sky, he went through the river Anambra. Then he arrived at Aguleri. Aguleri. All right, and that was how it proceeded.